Hello everyone, welcome to Baji Rao IAS Academy. See, we have been discussing mains general studies paper 1 questions from past few years, right? So we have discussed up to 16 questions, and in this lecture we will discuss next questions. They are 17th, from 17th question onwards we will discuss all the remaining questions in the general studies paper 1, right? So before proceeding into the discussion, please subscribe to Bajirao IAS Academy YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon. Okay, so you will get regular updates. Right. So when come to the questions analysis, the 17th question is about India's food production. There was a time when India used to import food grains from US and other countries because of food production was not up to that levels where India could meet its food security needs. So therefore, India has emerged from a deficit food country to a surplus food country. Now, India has been one of the key pillar of global food security. So therefore, the question emphasizes on from being net food importer in 1960s, India has emerged as a net food exporter to the world and provide reasons for the same. We need to provide reasons how India has emerged from being the food importer to food exporter. Okay, so how we need to approach this question? We need to approach this question by providing some data regarding India's food production. It would be better if you provide data on the levels of food production before 1960s and now food production. So what is the difference between the food production? However, it is estimated that since 1960s to 2020s, India's food production has increased fourfold, right? So this fourfold increase in India's food production is very important for India's food security, and it is also very important for world's food security, particularly in the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia-Ukraine war, because Russia and Ukraine were considered as wheat baskets. They produce majority of the wheat. Since the breakdown of the war, there has been a food crisis, okay, along with the energy crisis and fertilizer crisis. So in this backdrop, India has emerged as a major food exporter to the world. In the introduction itself, it would be better if you provide some data regarding India's food production, right? So you can see here, early post-independence years, India heavily imported basic food grains from US. That was, India imported most of its food grains from US. So here it is given some data such as 3,747,000 tons of cereals in the year 1960s and 61 in this particular year. However, over a period of time, India's food production has increased manifold, and now India has emerged as a net food grain exporter. In order to support this line, we can mention the data given by the Agricultural Processed Agriculture Products Export Development Authority, right? So this is APEDA. So this says that India's total exports in the financial year 2021-22 is around 24.8 billion rupees. 24.8 billion worth of food products were exported to the entire world. See, total exports of India is around 740 billion. However, in the 740 billion exports, agricultural exports of 24.8 billion is still low, but compared to the previous export records of India in terms of food grains, this 24.8 billion is one of the highest food exports from India, because we have a huge chunk of population, and it is also important for us to ensure food security of those population, right? So once we are able to ensure food security for our 140 crore population, then only we look for the export market. So therefore, India's food production has increased manyfold. Now, in the introduction, you need to give such a data so that it will be more appealing to the examiner, right? So once you provide such data, so how do you start the answer? You start the answer by giving reasons behind this gradual or significant transformation in the food production. See, I would suggest you to write such a subheading, and after writing such subheading, you just keep it in a box. Okay, so when you keep it this in a box, you properly highlight this subheading, that whatever is asked in the question is, the examiner used to feel like whatever is asked by the examiner is addressed by the candidate, right? So first you need to write reasons behind the transformation and list out the reasons. What are the reasons for this rapid transformation? We all know that the first and foremost reason for rapid increase in the food grain production is green revolution. The green revolution takes place in the decade of 1960s. So what are the key pillars of green revolution? The key pillars include high yielding crop varieties. This is very important for achieving high food grain productivity. Once the one thing is high yielding crop varieties, and second thing is modern farming methods. Modern farming methods means mechanization was increasingly used. Along with mechanization, within the farms, fertilizers, pesticides, and irrigation infrastructure has significantly improved. So therefore, it has rapidly increased India's total food production. So the Green Revolution took place in the years 1960s and 1970s, right? So this has substantially increased India's agricultural productivity, right? So Green Revolution is first reason for this transformation, and the second reason for this transformation is improved infrastructure. Not just we have used high yielding variety crops, but we also invested in infrastructure. So infrastructure like irrigation systems, warehousing, and transportation networks. See, transportation is also very important because there are perishable items. If we do not have adequate transportation networks, there would be high wastage of those perishable food products. So transportation networks also played a very crucial role in doubling farmers agricultural productivity, right? So the third factor is government policies. What comes under the government policies? So see, the government has introduced MSPs, right? So MSPs worked as an incentive for the farmers to cultivate more and more crops. Apart from MSPs, the government has also announced subsidies: the electricity subsidy, the power subsidy, and the fertilizer subsidy also. So these subsidies have provided an incentive for the farmers to cultivate more crops, because the government has been providing incentives, financial incentives, both direct and indirect incentives to the farmers, right? Apart from the minimum supporting prices and subsidized fertilizers, the government has also substantially increased the amount of institutional credit also for the farmers, right? So institutional credit is provided through NABARD. Institutional credit is provided through NABARD. Institutional credit has led to farmers' reduced dependence on local moneylenders who often charge exorbitant interest rates, right? So therefore, in this context, it helped farmers come out of the debt burden also. Uh, the institutional credit has multiple benefits. Now, if you remember, as part of the institutional credit mechanism, the government has also introduced Kisan Credit Card Scheme. So these Kisan Credit Card Scheme also provided loans, low interest loans to farmers, and this in a way encouraged farmers to cultivate more crops, because it is able to meet their input needs input needs of the farmers. So recently government has also introduced PM Kisan program. PM Kisan program. So this also provides financial incentive of 6,000 rupees per landed farmers per annum. Okay, landed farmers per annum. And this also, the farmer will be able to meet his input needs, right? So these government policies have helped the farming community to engage in the agriculture sector. When they are able to engage in the agriculture sector, when the gross cropped area and net sown area has been increasing, that also led to the increased food production, right? So the other factor is technological advancement. What does it mean when we say technological advancement? So there was a gradual shift from the drought power to mechanized tools being used in the agriculture sector, right? So in the Western countries, when agriculture is being transformed to mechanized, the production would be the production has rapidly increased. Mechanization increases the production and reduces the drought power. Okay, so mechanization, precision farming, they have improved farm productivity, and as well as they have reduced the post-harvest losses. So if you remember, in India, post-harvest losses are much higher. In fact, Ashok Dalwai committee, MS Swaminathan committee, so those committees have excessively stressed on reducing the post-harvest losses. Because if we are able to reduce the post-harvest losses, that would significantly increase the production, significantly increase the availability of food grains, and also increase farm incomes. Okay, also increase farm incomes. So therefore, it is also important to reduce the post-harvest losses. So these are some of the reasons for gradual or rapid transformation in the food grain production. So what would be the other reasons? The other reasons are crop diversification. Yes, we have focused on the crop diversification. What happened was, after green revolution that was introduced in 1960s, our focus would be on self-reliance. Okay, achieving self-reliance in food grain production. So therefore, the first green revolution has been excessively emphasized on wheat and wheat and rice production, and neglected other crops. So over a period of time, when government introduced the minimum supporting prices for other crops, around 22 crops, when the government introduced the minimum supporting prices, farmers also started cultivating other crops. Okay, so since farmers have started cultivating other crops, the crop diversification has taken place in a large scale. Particularly, farmers have focused on high value horticulture crops. What are the high value horticulture crops? Such as fruits, vegetables, spices, and they have boosted India's agricultural exports over a period of time. So you can give an example of mangoes being exported to other countries from India. Not just mangoes. India is known for other fruits. India is the second largest producer and exporter of fruits worldwide. Right. So after that, you should also mention about the globalization and trade liberalization. Because what happens with the globalization and trade liberalization, the world is increasingly interconnected. For example, the food being produced in India would be sold in other countries like USA and the European Union. The trade was further liberalized between those countries, and tariffs and non-tariff barriers have been, dismantled because of trade liberalization and globalization. This further enhanced India's export potential. And since India already have surplus food grains, this led to the rapid, increase in India's exports to other countries. So therefore, you can also mention globalization and trade liberalization is one of the reason for the same. So you have mentioned all the reasons for a rapid increase in food grain production, how India became an importer to net exporter of food grains. Next, you have to mention some way forward. Way forward means still agriculture has been facing a lot of problems. right? So a lot of problems. See, it is estimated that according to Food and Agricultural Organization, India need to increase food productivity. Okay, food productivity by 60%. 60% by 2030 in order to meet the food security needs of India's population. So therefore, India need to rapidly increase the food production to meet the food security needs. Apart from that, around 45 percentage of India's population dependent on agriculture. India's population is dependent on agriculture. However, agriculture has been contributing to just 18 percentage of India's GDP. And apart from that, there's a huge disguised unemployment within the agriculture. Farmers have been facing poverty, and rural people have been facing malnutrition. Okay, hidden hunger also. Why hidden hunger? Because we have been producing foods which lack nutrients, right? So apart from hidden hunger, farmers also, do not able to get enough remunerative prices for their produce. So in order to address all these problems, we need to give a possible way forward. So this way forward will give you a holistic sense for the answer, a holistic and comprehensiveness for the answer, right? Now, when you write a way forward, what way forward you have to write? So the way forward includes sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture means transforming our agriculture towards the organic farming and zero budget natural farming. Zero budget natural farming. This zero budget natural farming is introduced by Subhash Palekar. Okay, you just remember this. And sustainable agriculture need to be further prioritized and promoted, and it should be made part of the national mission for sustainable agriculture that was already introduced by the government of India to promote sustainable agriculture. Secondly, climate resilience. See, climate resilience is very important for ensuring food security and protecting the food productivity. Okay, ensuring food security and also ensuring the food productivity will not get impacted because of the climate change. Now, the government of India has been focusing on millets, right? Because they are more climate resilient compared to the traditional crops. So climate resilient means less water intensive. They are salt resistant and drought tolerant crops. So such climate resilience need to be, you know, enhanced in India's agricultural production. So therefore, we need to invest in climate resilient crop varieties. So it is mandatory that we should invest in climate resilient crop varieties. Secondly, crop diversification is also very important because when there's lack of diversification of crops, that lead to the soil erosion, right? So land losing soil fertility. So therefore, we should focus on diversification of our crops, diversification towards the high value horticulture crops, and we should also emphasize on organic farming. So organic farming and high value crops have a huge export potential. So therefore, it significantly improves the farmers' income, and it would also lift them out of the poverty. And apart from that, market access is also a very important pillar. So market access means there were regional blocks, for example, regional comprehensive economic partnership. So these regional blocks will ensure India's access to external markets in terms of agriculture. So therefore, while protecting India's interest, India should also explore opportunities in other parts of the world to export its own agricultural products. Now, when you export agricultural products, that would give fillip to the food processing industry. Food processing industry. So not just food processing industry, and cold storage industry will develop. Cold storage industry will develop. So apart from the cold storage industry, the forward and backward linkages will take place, and it will also improve the bargaining power of the farmers. So therefore, India should also focus on market access, right? Now, this is very important, digital agriculture. So digital agriculture in terms of marketing of products, agricultural price information, and also knowing new techniques, for example, precision farming, crop monitoring, supply chain management. So for all these factors, digital technologies and information and communication technologies will play a very crucial role. Okay, so this will meet the extension needs of the farmers, and will provide scientific inputs to the farmers, and this will help reduce their vulnerability to the climate vagaries, and will also enhance their incomes over a period of time. For example, you can give the example of electronic national agricultural market, right? So farmers can discover better prices for their produces through enam platform. Now, apart from that, we should also focus on food processing. See, food processing is very important aspect, because through food processing we add value to different products. So when we are able to add value to the products, then that would significantly increase the prices of a particular product, and it will ultimately benefit the farmer. In fact, if you look at some statistics, around 30% of total agricultural products processed in China. However, in India, it is less than 5%. So 5% of total agricultural products is processed. So more agricultural products, if we process, then more export potential, and it would significantly increase the farmers' income as well. Since we are able to achieve this surplus food production, and we are able to export more and more food, it is also important that we should focus on enhancing our food processing infrastructure, right? So for this, public private partnership is a better option. And apart from public private partnership, we should also encourage entrepreneurship at the local level, right? So the government has already created mega food parks mega food parks for increasing the food processing value chain. So therefore, this is how you need to address this answer, and this is how you need to structure the entire answer. So in the conclusion, you need to emphasize on food security. You need to emphasize on food security and sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture should be the future of Indian agriculture. Okay, so please remember, the conclusion should be positive. It should be positive and optimistic in nature. Okay, optimistic in nature, so that it will give the examiner a good impression, right? So this is the 17th question. So the next question is, does urbanization lead to the segregation or marginalization of poor Indian metropolises? Right. So what are the metropolitan cities? We have several metropolitan cities. Delhi is a metropolitan city. Bengaluru is a metropolitan city. And Hyderabad is a metropolitan city. Kolkata is a metropolitan city. So what are these metropolitan cities? If a population of a particular city is around 1 million, okay, so population of a particular city is 1 million, then that city is known as a metropolitan city. Now, in these metropolitan cities, the population has been rapidly increasing. So, according to 2011 census data, urban population is around 29.5%. However, it is estimated that by the year 2035, urban population would reach around 45% of India's population, right? Because of inadequate employment opportunities and the different pull factors and push factors, the population, the people from rural areas have been migrating to urban areas for better standard of living, for employment, healthcare, education facilities. So they are migrating from rural areas to urban areas. when they migrated to urban areas, they face several problems, right? So they face problems like education, healthcare, housing, sanitation, and lack of organized or formal employment facilities, lack of social security and social safety nets. So this question particularly focuses on, does urbanization lead to more segregation and marginalization of poor people who are living in the urban areas? Right. So in these type of questions, it is always advisable that you should start with some data. You should start with some data. So India is rapidly urbanizing, no doubt. India's urbanization has been rapidly increasing. However, it is estimated to host 50% of its population in cities by 2050. Okay, so in fact, this is United Nations estimate says that by 2050, India's urban centers would host 50% of population. India's urban centers would host 15% of total population. So urbanization is characterized by a fast growing economy. Okay, so there's a fast growing economy on the one hand. On the other hand, there's an unsustainable nature. The so unsustainable nature of this economic growth is a grave concern. So what does it mean, unsustainable nature of this economic growth? Because there's a growth in inequalities. Okay, growth in inequalities. So apart from growth in inequalities, there's a growth in slums. You can give the example of Dharavi in Mumbai. Okay, you can give the example of Dharavi in Mumbai. So this unsustainable nature of urban growth has led to the segregation and marginalization of the poor in metropolitan cities. Okay, so we have discussed that the growth in urban centers is unsustainable, and this unsustainable growth has led to the segregation and marginalization of the poor in the metropolitan cities, right? So the first factor is how it has led to the segregation. Firstly, housing segregation, right? So within the urban centers, if you see, there's a separation in the housing of, for rich and poor. Rich live in gated communities, and poor live in slums. And slum areas have a very limited facilities. They do not have healthcare, education, sanitation, and poor hygienic conditions. And housing is also a very a poor standard of living in this slum areas. So therefore, the clear housing segregation. So you can give the example of Delhi, where a third of Delhi residences are actually part of slums which have no basic amenities. And secondly, there were huge economic disparities. Yes, by Oxfam survey, we can clearly see that there were huge economic disparities between the people in urban areas, between the rich and poor. There were huge income inequalities among the people because people lack skills. According to India Skills Report, only 4.35% of India's population are skilled in comparison to Japan, that has around 86% of its population skilled, and South Korea around 96% of its total population is skilled. So 4.35% is a very dismal amount of skills. So when people have inadequate skills, so they end up doing informal jobs. What does informal jobs means? For example, they are being part of the construction work in the urban areas. So when they are part of such an informal jobs, they do not have a job security, income security, and also social security, right? So this led to the huge economic disparities among the people. Okay, so they are often seen as a source of cheap labor within the urban areas, and when they lack skills and they end up doing informal jobs, it often creates, or they will often fall in the vicious cycle of poverty. Okay, there's a poverty cycle. It is very important that you should remember this poverty cycle, how this poverty cycle usually works. Now, third aspect is limited access to services. Since in urban areas, poor people have a very limited access to services such as clean water, healthcare, sanitation, and education. So, when they lack access to such a facilities or such a amenities, they will be further segregated to poor. And fourth aspect would be social exclusion based on intersectionality. For example, even in the urban areas, there were discrimination on the basis of caste, religion, and ethnicity. Even communal violence also used to take place in the urban areas, and those people who are poor and living in slums, they are most vulnerable to these, social exclusion activities. For example, manual scavenging, even though that was prohibited by 2013 prohibition of manual scavenging, rehabilitation and redressal legislation, still as a caste based practice is still prevalent in Tamil Nadu, Chennai. So therefore, poor are increasingly segregated and marginalized in the urban centers. So apart from that, the government policies have also not focused adequately on those people who are marginalized and who are poor living in the urban areas. Okay, so policymakers provide a basic amenities like for the urban population, so they are struggling because of inadequate resources, particularly with the urban local governments. And haphazard planning in the urban areas would also leading to a major problem with respect to segregation of these vulnerable communities. And in fact, the government policies have also been unintentionally discriminating the poor people who are living in the urban areas. So you can give the example of Dharavi. This is Asia's largest slum. Okay, so this is Asia's largest slum. Now, other factor is vulnerability to disasters. So if you look at the recent floods in the urban areas, whether it is Mumbai floods, Chennai floods, Bengaluru floods, Hyderabad floods, in all those areas, people who are poor and living in slums, they are mostly vulnerable. So here it is given 2023 Delhi floods. So they have disproportionately affected the low income groups. So apart from the Delhi floods, the recent COVID-19 pandemic pushed millions of people who are poor into the vicious cycle of poverty again, because they have lost their employment since they lack skills, and they do not they are not able to find a formal employment opportunities, right? However, we need to ensure, we need to write the other dimension also. So the other dimension is, despite all these challenges, urban centers have been providing some opportunities for the poor. This is true because since urban centers are providing some opportunities for the poor people and they are engines for the economic growth, only then people will be able to sustain in the urban areas. Okay, so urban areas have also been providing some amenities to, or some opportunities to poor people who are living over there. So the first and foremost, participation of the people in the gig economy. See, the gig based economy mostly concentrated in and around the urban centers. If you look at food delivery, platforms like Zomato, Swiggy, and delivery platform, so all other platforms are located in the urban centers. So therefore there has been a rapid growth in the gig economy in the urban centers. So this gig economy has been providing the opportunities to otherwise informal unskilled workers, firstly. Secondly, the anonymity being offered by the urban centers is helping poor people, because anonymity means in urban areas, people uh, not adequately they don't focus extensively on caste, religion. So therefore it provides an anonymity of their identity, So when it provides an anonymity to their identity, it will help poor integrate and access opportunities as equal to all other people who are living in the urban areas, so free from the caste and religious discrimination. Thirdly, the government policy focus. So the government has also been providing basic amenities in the urban areas. For example, you can mention about Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, Scheme 2.0, Swachh Bharat Mission, PM Swanidhi, and apart from these programs, PM Awas Yojana, okay, PM Awas Yojana, Urban. Now, after writing this, you have to mention some possible solutions, so some possible suggestions. So through such suggestions, we can minimize the segregation of poor people in the urban areas. So how can for example, we can focus on skilling people, okay, skilling poor people, promoting entrepreneurship, promoting entrepreneurship through National Rural Livelihoods Mission, extending self-help groups, benefits to urban women, benefits to urban women, and we should also focus on increasing the capacity, okay, increasing the capacity of uh, urban local bodies through funding, functions, and functionaries. So you can mention such suggestions or solutions in order to minimize the social exclusion of vulnerable people. Now you can write this in whatever suggestions we have discussed. You can write them in the way forward. So, however, the attention must be paid to income generation, transportation, empowerment of beneficiaries to reduce the possible future challenges or the problems. For example, transportation means so pollution free mass urban transportation. So this is very important, and we should also focus on income generation, thereby reducing the existing income inequalities, okay, reducing existing income inequalities among people, and also should focus on empowerment of the beneficiaries through various government programs. However, at last, in the conclusion, you need to emphasize on planned urban development, okay, planned urban development, and you can link it with the smart cities program. So smart cities program, and you can also mention the recommendations of ISER Judge Ahluwalia committee, ISER Judge Ahluwalia committee on urban planning, so that your conclusion would be best, right? So it would be better, right? So this is all about this question. So the next question is about the caste system. See, in this year examination, particularly in paper 1 2023 GS paper 1, we see two questions on the caste system. One is for 10 marks and another question is for 15 marks. So you can see the importance of the caste system, in the general studies paper 1 mains examination. So please focus on this aspect as well: caste system, globalization, communalism, etc., some of the most important topics in the society, right? So this question is about why is caste identity in India both fluid and static. So this is also a very important question, because in India, the caste identity is being masked by urbanization, industrialization, increasing education opportunities and employment. So therefore we can see this from the lens of the fluidness of the caste system, because these aspects have masked the caste system and they have made caste system less relevant. On the other hand, the static aspect of the caste system means the caste-based occupations still prevalent in Indian society, and caste-based associations are still prevalent, and also caste-based mobilization of people for political purposes. So those factors also making the caste system static. So therefore, we need to write why is caste identity in India is fluid. This is the first part, and in the second part, you need to write why is caste is static. Okay, why is caste system is static. Now in the first part, you just have to write, you just have to define caste system. So what is a caste system, or what is a caste identity, and then introduce what is asked in the question. So caste identity is actually a complex social construct, right? So in India, caste system is a complex social construct that actually exhibits paradoxical characteristics. What are the paradoxical characteristics? Yes. So on the one hand, the caste system is fluid. Okay, why caste system is fluid? Because of reforms have brought in the caste system and the changes in the existing society. So because of these factors, the caste has becoming fluid. However, on the other hand, the caste system is still static. Okay, so why it is static? Because of the perpetuating still static. Why it is static? Because of the existing caste based occupations and caste based identities. So these factors have been perpetuating inequality and discrimination. Okay, now the first part of the answer is reasons for fluidity in the caste system. This is, we need to address this part of the answer. So what are the reasons? Firstly, urbanization is one such factor for the you know uh, fluidity of the caste system. So why it is a factor? Why urbanization is a factor in fluidity of the caste system? Because with the urbanization, the rigid caste boundaries, so the rigid caste boundaries of the people weakens. Okay, so these caste boundaries were weakened. For example, people from various castes may interact more freely, and this would lead to intercaste friendships and intercaste marriages. So this is the first point. And in the second point, education is the other major factor. With the education, it empowers individuals to transcend traditional caste rules. So when literacy rates have been increasing, when education is increasingly accessible for all the people, then the caste system is no longer relevant, right? So people transcend the traditional caste identities. You can give the example of educated individuals. They very often choose their careers often outside what their caste mandates. Okay, so there were traditional caste based occupations. However, educated candidates very often choose profession or careers outside their caste based occupation. And thirdly, economic mobility of the people. So what does economic mobility of the people? Economic mobility of the means irrespective of the caste they belong to. So different people have occupied different positions within the economic structure. Okay, within the economic structure, different people hold different positions. So the caste barriers are no longer, a hindrance. Okay, caste barriers are no longer a hindrance. There's a huge economic mobility among different social groups since we have been experiencing a better economic prospects, right? So you can give the example of a person from a lower caste may achieve upward mobility through entrepreneurship or employment in a different region. Now, after that, you can also mention intercaste marriages among the people. So there's a growing intercaste marriages. People are no longer preferring marriages within the same caste. Okay, so because intercaste couple create new identities, so they often transcend their traditional caste-based identities or backgrounds. So fifth, social reform movements. So this is very important. Social reform movements have made the caste system more and more fluid. For example, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar fought against the untouchability and the caste system. He also focused on uplifting the marginalized or the weaker sections of the society. Okay, there were because of efforts of leaders like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, reservations were introduced and affirmative action is provided by the Indian Constitution. So these factors have also made the caste system more and more fluid. The other factor is cultural fusion. Okay, so different cultures have been interacting with each other over a period of time. So this cultural fusion has made people transcend their caste based identities. Okay, so you can give the example of festivals and celebrations. They often incorporate elements from various castes and they foster unity. After that, the political representation, right? So in fact, Indian Constitution Article 330 and 332, after that the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts have also reserved seats based on the caste system. Okay, based on the caste. So therefore the political representation has also led to the the fluid nature of the caste system, leading to more and more caste fluidity. So you can give the example of political alliances across caste lines can reshape the power dynamics. Okay, so we also have examples of caste based political parties, particularly after the Green Revolution, right? And the next part of the answer is reasons for the static nature of the caste identity. Okay, this is the second part of the answer. So why caste system is a static? It is because the historical roots of the caste system, or the historical roots means the old caste systems have a deep-seated roots in the Indian society. So this is one such reason. For example, in the Manusmriti itself, this is an ancient Indian text, and this has codified caste-based social norms. So now Hindu religion or people who are practicing Hinduism still believe in the caste system. Okay, so traditional caste system or the Varna system. Secondly, endogamy. Strict rules against intercaste marriages maintain caste purity. Okay, so still, even though people have been preferring to marry people outside the caste system, but endogamy is still strictly practiced across the country. So this is where the caste has become more and more static. So many families pressure individuals to marry within their own caste. So third, discrimination and stigmatization of people based on their particular caste. For example, Dalits or the untouchables in several states are often discriminated. So they often live in isolate. They often live in isolation, and they are very often known as socially excluded people. And fourth aspect which has been making caste system static is political manipulation. What kind of a political manipulation? So the caste system is still being used by the politicians for vote bank or mobilization of the voters. So caste based vote banks are common in Indian politics. Still caste has a huge influence on the Indian political system. So fifth aspect is the socio-economic disparities among the people. Yes, there were a huge socio-economic disparities between different castes. So because of these socio-economic disparities, the caste system is further deeply entrenched among the people. Okay, so now you can also write the lack of value-based education system. So when we are not able to sensitize our children about the caste system and about the people from other caste, so then it would further deeply entrench the caste system in the minds of the young children. So therefore, lack of value-based education is another reason for static nature of India's caste system. So sixth aspect is the traditional occupation. Right? The caste system has mandated certain occupations for certain castes. So those people still having such hereditary occupations, right? So they still engaged in such hereditary occupations. So this has also been making caste system more and more static. So finally, when you conclude this answer, you need to emphasize on creating an equitable, egalitarian society. Okay, so an equitable and egalitarian society for inclusive development. So this is how you need to conclude the answer. It should be positive and optimistic. you need to emphasize on dismantling the caste-based identities for inclusive growth and inclusive development of a country, right? So the next question is, and the last question, the 20th question in GS paper 1 is the impact of the post-liberal economy on ethnic identity and communalism in India. So how it has impacted the ethnic identity and communalism in India. See, in this question, what you have to do is first you have to briefly introduce what is ethnic identity. So what is ethnic identity and what is communalism? And then you have to link both ethnic identity and communalism to post-liberal economy. So this is how you need to conclude. This is how you need to structure this answer. Now, firstly, you have to, write ethnic identity. So this is a sense of belonging to a particular cultural or ethnic group. So what is ethnic identity? Ethnic identity is actually a sense of belonging to a particular cultural or ethnic group. However, the communalism refers to a divisive and often conflict-ridden politics, and that were based on religious and communal lines. Okay, so we have defined both communalism and ethnic identity very clearly. And secondly, in the post-liberal economy in India, we need to link this ethnic identities and communalism with the post-liberal economy. So post-liberal economy is signified with the LPG reforms. Okay, we have introduced the liberalization, privatization, and globalization. This post-liberal economy marked by economic reforms and globalization since 1990s. Okay, so they have a far-reaching impact on the ethnic identity and communalism. So this is how you need to link this post-liberal economy with these aspects. Okay, so this is considered as a best introduction. Now you have introduced the question and then address the first part of the answer. So the impact of the post-liberal economy on the ethnic identity. So after ethnic identity, you need to write the impact of the post-liberal economy on the communalism in India. So firstly, the cultural erosion has taken place. So cultural erosion means different ethnic groups used to practice different cultures. Right? So these, post-liberal economy has led to the integration of different cultures. So therefore, erosion of the existing cultures. So you can give the example of westernization and the popularity of the fast food chains like McDonald's. So they can dilute traditional Indian cultural practices. So this is the first point. And the second point is urbanization and migration. So economic opportunities. So after the liberalization, the economic opportunities have been significantly increased in urban areas. So they have resulted in huge rapid urbanization, and rapid urbanization resulted in subsequent migration of the people from rural areas to urban areas. Okay, so there were significant rural to urban migration. So this has led to the blending of ethnic identities in cosmopolitan cities. So what does cosmopolitan cities means? Cosmopolitan cities means people with different identities, different cultures have been living together. They have been integrated, interconnected together. For example, various regions settling in Mumbai, people from different regions settling in Mumbai, adopting more generic urban identity rather than their own specific regional identity. So the third example is uh, homogenization of consumption patterns. So with the post-liberal economy, what generally happened was there was a homogenization of the existing consumption pattern. So consumption pattern have become more and more standardized. So this has diminished the local ethnic identities and their practices. So you can give the example of the prevalence of international clothing brands. So they may have overshadowed the traditional attire because in traditional ethnic cultures, so there were different clothing attires. So those were dominated by the international clothing brands, right? So next, you can mention about the income disparities among the people, right? So how, because with the increasing economic opportunities, those people who are skilled, who are educated, they're able to better use the existing economic opportunities. On the other hand, those people who are poor, who are uneducated, who lack skills, they are able to, you know they are not able to participate in the economic opportunities created by the post-liberal economy. So this has also significantly resulted in economic disparities between different ethnic groups. So you can give the example of lower income groups may feel marginalized and struggle to preserve their cultural practices. Okay. Now after that, you can also mention social media and global influences. See, after the advent of the social media and the global influences, so they have potentially diluted the existing cultures, the existing literature, the existing way of life and the identity of the tribal communities. Okay, so the influence of global celebrities and trends on social media can shape people's preferences and people's values. And seventh, intermarriage and social integration. So this has also significantly increased the inter marriages among different ethnic communities, and this has also led to the social integration of the people, and that has made the ethnic identities less relevant in a post-liberal Indian economy. You can give the example of inter-ethnic marriages. So they may have resulted in fusion of different cultural practices. Okay. Now after that, you have to talk about, uh, you know, uh, so the impact of the post-liberal economy on the communalism. So we talked about the first part about the post-liberal economy and its impact on the ethnic identities. And the other part is impact of the post-liberal economy on the communalism in India. So the first and foremost factor is economic competition, right? So this has created economic disparities between different communal groups, and that led to the communal tensions among different groups. You can give the example of communal rights in Gujarat 2002. So they were primarily fueled by economic disparities among the people and the competition. And the second factor is political manipulation, right? So politicians have used religion, right? So to mobilize people for vote bank, right? So therefore, this political manipulation, especially after the post-liberal economy, has also led to the increasing communal tensions. You can mention that political parties using religious identity for electoral polarization. So the third aspect is resources allocation. Access to economic resources, they are very often biased, or they are very often based on the communal lines. For example, in India, Congress party is often criticized as a pseudo secular. Okay, pseudo secular means it has been following the policies of appeasing the minorities. So therefore, there were access to economic resources, and they are very often biased along the communal lines. So this has often created resentment and conflict. So unequal distribution of government benefits based on the religious criteria. See, we should not look at the one side of the story. So the other side of the story, there were still discriminatory practices in different parts of the country based on religion given by majority communities, right? So the fourth aspect is crisis diversion. So crisis diversion means, so economic crisis can be very often diverted by the political class, okay, so to fuel the communal tensions. So very often the economic crisis or any other issues may be diverted, right? So the communal violence during the economic downturns to divert the public anger. And fifth, education and employment bias has also a major factor, has become a major factor. So discrimination in education and employment opportunities, they often create communal tensions. So you can give example of allegations of job reservation policies. They're very often favoring specific communities, leading to conflicts. So this is all happened particularly after the post-liberal economy in the year 1991. So finally, you need to conclude this answer by emphasizing on social inclusiveness in a society like India, and you can use the term Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. Okay, so while achieving the economic growth and economic development, we need to focus on achieving the goal of Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. So this is how you have to conclude this answer. So by this question, we have discussed all 20 questions. From the next lecture, we will discuss the GS paper 2, General Studies paper 2, all the questions. Okay, so that's all from my side, and thank you so much.